Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Michael Abbott. I lead the global banking capital markets practice at Accenture. And what I want to walk you through is a little bit about the future of banking. But before I go to the future, I want to step back a little bit in time here. Back to 1950, all right? 1950. The UNIVAC 1 had just been launched, right? Color TV was just starting. But the real innovation that year was not digital. The real innovation that year was financial. It was the year that the Diners Club card was introduced. And many of you are saying, what's the Diners Club card? I don't remember that. Well, the Diners Club card was a proprietary card that was the first credit card to allow you to purchase across multiple different locations. So up until that point in time in banking, you could have a Sears card, you could have a Montgomery Ward card, you probably don't know that one either, or you could have an ExxonMobil card, but you could not have a card that would work across multiple locations. So they were the first to launch, and what did the banks do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing for almost a decade plus, until Bank of America decided to launch Bank AmeriCard. Right? And you're probably wondering, I've never seen a Bank AmeriCard out there, right? Well, what happened was they realized that the power of payments was not about competing with the bank down the road. They realized that the real benefit was collaborating with the others. So what happened was a number of other banks out there said, you know what? We want to use what you have. So in essence, they did the first early version of open sourcing. They franchised it to other banks. And the other banks said, well, you know what? I don't want to call my card Bank AmeriCard. So they gave it a name, and they called it Visa, right? By 1977, Visa was a separate organization, self-funded, and has fundamentally changed the way payments work around the world. And before we go forward, I want you to just think about what were the lessons learned from 75 years ago in this, right? One, that shared standards can make an enormous difference, right? That you want a common core and compete on the edges. And that technology, you can build cooperative technology, right, that can create a competitive market. You can build cooperative technology while at the same time competing on brand, marketing, pricing, and all those different things. Now that's interesting as a story, but let's move forward to today. Here's the challenge. Every board meeting I'm in, every board member I talk to, they say, I have gotten productivity in every single part of my business except one, technology. And they ask me every time, what do I do about it? Global banking technology is about to surpass $1 trillion in spend globally in the next few years. And by the way, just a quick stat, it is growing 2 to 3 times faster than revenue, and you can see that as the percent of revenue on the left-hand side of this chart. So what do you do about it? What do we do? Before we jump into what we do, I want to just dive into deep in terms of what we see, what's happening at the macro level. What's the case for change here? Well, first, the vast majority of spend inside of a bank does not go to innovation. It goes to just simply keeping the lights on, remaining compliant, updating old stuff, whatever it may be. That's the right-hand side of this chart. The left-hand side of this chart is even more interesting when you dig underneath it, right? The vast majority of spend is still people, which is good. It's the people in this room. But the second biggest spend is software. And you know what? Software is growing twice as fast as every other expense in that line over the last several decades, and increasing at the rate now. So here's the challenge. This is what we taught. This is what we see at the board level. If you look at this box and you think of this box as being 100% of your technology budget, so what the board of directors is looking at, right? This is 100%. Here's what the problem is. The problem in banking is it starts at the bottom of this box. It starts at the fact that there is just a absolute cornucopia of hardware differences sitting inside of these banks. I have banks, and many of you won't believe this, you won't even know it exists, that still run their bank on Unisys systems and buy their spare parts on eBay. It's true, it's true. They run their banks on Unisys and they buy their spare parts on eBay. That's what you're dealing with at the bottom of this. Now all of a sudden, you've got enterprise software, you've got old legacy, you've got Unisys, you've got mainframe and everything. But that's not the only problem. That's where the complexity starts. Then it moves to the operating system level, and then it moves to the software level. And if you look at the software level in the middle of that box, I'm sure a few of you got a new bill for your VM, your virtual machines this year that went up quite a bit. Some of them, 100 to 500%. If the size of that middle box, that software box, is going like this, and you're the board of directors and you want to keep that overall box the same and you still have to pay for that software, what is your only choice? To reduce the number of people. Is that the right answer? Absolutely not, right? That is absolutely the wrong answer to have. So the question is, how do you break this paradigm? What do you do to change this, right? Well, I think the answer is starting to come out there, right? There's no doubt, if you look at Linux now, Linux has become the foundational software for all of banking across the board. Kubernetes is the dial tone for everything that we're going to do out there, right, going forward. Whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, there's versions of it, and I know many of you will argue about all the differences and so on and so forth. But the reality of it is that we are collapsing to a Linux-based operating system for the banking world one way or another, right? Secondly, and Hillary mentioned some of this earlier. She started talking about this is my version of that. When you move to a Linux-based modern engineering environment, the productivity gains for developers are off the charts. Whether it's individual performance, whether it's lower burnout, whether it's attracting new talent, whether it's the speed at which you can do the work, the bottom line is everything shifts to the right when it comes to your people. On top of it, the most valuable thing that you have, I'd argue, right? So back to this page. What's the answer? The answer is to shift right. You have to basically make a commitment to simplify this environment. In many ways, I think we're going to go back to the future. The 1970s, we had the mainframe. It was simple. Everything was in one place, right? The problem we have, and the reason why the challenge is today, is that we pay for a ton of software so we can go pay again to fix it, right? That's what's going on. If we shift this to the right, all of a sudden you can move to a much more simplified environment up and down the stack, and you can change the game and you can break that paradigm of expense. And we're going to get into that a little bit deeper. You may say to yourself, okay, Mike, that's great, but does it work? Is there any evidence of this, right? The ROI, Hillary's right. I mean, I've been a banker all my life. Everyone wants to know what's the ROI. Here's your evidence. If we've looked at banks around the world, and we've looked at new Fintech and tanker banks. So what you're seeing on here, a bank from South Korea and then a bank from Brazil called Nubank on the left. When you tear apart their cost per active, you'll find that Nubank, apples to apples against other Brazilian banks, taking out the branches, all the noise, is 70% cheaper per active account. 70%. That is an incredible difference. Why? They are built 100% on open source technology, up and down the entire stack. Databases, languages, etc., you name it. That is how you change the game. That's how you reinvent and how you break that paradigm. That's what I tell the boards that we're talking to all the time. And so I give you a little bit, so we asked the question, well, how about today? Do CIOs care? So this is a little bit of a preview. We won't release this for another month or so. But we just finished a survey of all the CIOs around the world, a number of them, hundreds of them. And here's what it came back. 85% of them are telling us they have open source moving in that direction on the top of their priority list over the next 3 to 5 years, right? That's almost 9 out of 10 are committed to doing something dramatically different. But the question is, what do you do that really changes the game? So here's what I would encourage all of you. We're going to go a couple levels deeper here, right? If you look at the banking stack out there, and you look at all the components out there, whether it's onboarding, risk, underwriting, reg reporting, you name it, payments, what you find is that when you look at all of it, and we've gone underneath it, 70% of it is common. 70% of what you do is there, right? The person next to you that's in another bank is not just your competitor, they could be your collaborator for 70% of what you do. And imagine that if instead of paying for it over and over again, that you shared that common core, that you committed to that above and beyond. If you thought about it the way Visa, the leaders in the banking industry thought about it 75 years ago, 50 years ago with Visa, you could think about how you could fundamentally rewire not just a few things, but all of it. But it requires collaboration, exactly what Gab was saying before, right? And when you do that, we've seen the results, right? We've seen it because we've worked on this around the world. I think your $1 million number is massively underestimated, massively. And I know it is because I've seen it, right? We've seen where companies take and they move to the right, where they shift right, where they move off of legacy environments, they commit to open source and they move that code over. We've seen 50 to 90% reduction in just the compute and software costs, right? Just the compute and software costs. And then if I put a bitwise and in the middle of this, for any of my C programmers out there, I knew I'd get a couple people would laugh at that. You also get a dramatic improvement in developer productivity, right? You get half your time gets spent in maintenance, you deploy more frequency, faster, you get a total lift on this. And by the way, all of this is stuff we measured before you add in the impact of potential Gen AI to change how this gets done and the speed of deployment on this. So open source can fundamentally, I believe, shift all of this. So with that in mind, I'm gonna just kind of ask a few questions here as you walk out. One, I think you ought to all ask yourself, what if? What if you collaborated instead of competed, right? I would challenge all of you to think in your organizations, what software is really necessary versus strategic, right? And you can draw a very hard line on that. Necessary software can be shared. Strategic is something you do individually, right? Your data is clearly strategic. Are your databases? Probably not, right? Does anybody in here, when you listen to an analyst call with your CEO, do they get a gold star for being the best in risk and reg reporting? No way. There's no way, right? The market doesn't care about that. What they care about, though, is getting efficiency on that. Identify those pieces of it, right? I would say, and I love the FluxNova thing, but make it the norm, not the exception. The folks in this room, you've done a phenomenal job contributing to this organization. Contributing is great, but collaborating is where you're going to make it. Even if it's 2 or 3 banks, a couple areas, we're working on it right now. I'm pushing my teams to do this across the board because you can amplify your costs then, right? The investment, every one of you are making the same investments over and over and over again. Think about bringing those together and how you could change the way all of this works, right? And last but not least, I think you're going to have to rethink the commercial model. The beautiful thing about open source is it's enabled us to monetize a lot of that, right? You should consider JVs, fundings, other creative mechanisms. And yeah, the FlexNova point was a great point. You cannot build open source without committing to how you're going to support it. So find the creative ways to do that. The software costs will drop dramatically, but you have to have a support model that goes forward. Otherwise, people will not make the change, right, for risk and regulatory purposes. And last but not least, I'd encourage all of you to think like a banker, right? Here's the bottom line. You have an enormous amount of latent value sitting in this room. Every $10 billion of software expense, inside is an expense for you. Outside, it's a $50 billion to $100 billion company, right? Think about what you could create out of this commercially if you went forward and how you could fund it in a very, very different way, right? You have an enormous latent value in what you're doing inside of there. So at this point in time, you're saying to yourself, okay, Mike, you're just a consultant. And my son, I think, is somewhere in the room out there. That's what he's saying to right now. He's saying, you're just a consultant. What do you know? Well, 36 years ago, I wasn't. I was a research scientist. And this thing dropped on my desk, and I was the first one to use it. Probably many of you will know what it is. Many of you will not know what it is. It is a Sun Microsystems workstation, all right? It ran Unix. It ran what's called Berkeley Systems Development 4.3, which I would argue to this day is still an unbelievable operating system, right? But what happened? You don't see these things. You never hear about Berkeley Systems Development 4.3 anymore, do you? No. Why? Because it was proprietary. And Linux came out in 1991, and it took over this, right? From that project and that computer, I went and I had the opportunity to build out TCP IP routers. And I watched as other companies basically tried to defend SNA, LU 6.2, Novelware, AppleTalk, names you don't even know right now. They were all networking protocols, proprietary. My lesson from all of this, and what I would tell you, open source, open wins every single time when you commit to it and you make it happen. So with that in mind, thank you for the time today. Appreciate it, and love what you're doing.